super excited about today's episode for a number of reasons. Number one, it's my first returning guest, Tracy O'Malley, a dear friend of mine, and we're still going to be going over, obviously, her story and how she, grew $1 million business in network marketing within 2 years, but the power of the Enneagram. And this is something that a lot of people, they know about and they think it may be just one of those personality tests, but this is something completely different. Tracy has such a deep knowledge of this. She shares so much wealth and knowledge in this episode. I know it's going to move you and your business forward. So I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Network Marketing Made Simple podcast. I am your host, Scott Aaron, and each and every week I'm going to come to you with short, simple, and powerful tactics of how you can grow your network marketing business, brand, bank account, and impact on those around you. And just remember, network marketing is not easy, but it can be made easy with simple steps to create the success that you truly deserve. So Tracy, welcome back to my podcast. And as you and I were talking in the pre-show, you are my first part 2 ever on my podcast. And I've had over 150 episodes, and you're my first double interview, which, says a lot. You're an amazing human being. So I wanted to get you back on here, but I'm just really excited because part 1 of what we talked about left so many people better. And, what we're going to be talking about today still is in deep alignment with network marketing and your zone of genius. But for some of the new listeners that have come on board since you and I first spoke, just do a little short intro on who you are and how you got into the network marketing profession, but more importantly, how you found your zone of genius with Enneagrams, and then we can kind of dive into what that is and how it really impacts your network marketing business.
Well, the cliff notes on Tracy O'Malley. And first of all, I just want to thank you for having me back on. To be the first return guest is such a huge honor. And, that speaks to my heart so much. Quality time is my love language. And the fact that you believe so much in me and the value that I can bring your beautiful, loyal, incredible audience means a lot to me. So we're going to just deliver today. But the cliff notes on how I ended up in network marketing, on paper, I was the least likely to be successful. When network marketing came to me, I was at a point in my life that was rock bottom, not necessarily the most ideal time on paper, but actually it is the ideal time. The things that you believe disqualify you are actually the things that qualify you for greatness in this industry. And, I was coming off of just getting out of rehab for alcohol, food addiction, codependency, anger issue, you name the addiction spiral, I pretty much covered all of them. I had just come off a sudden passing of my father. I was a single mom of 2 teenagers, the sole provider, emotionally, physically, spiritually, and financially. I was in a really shitty relationship that was modeling what I grew up with, which, that was an abusive alcoholic home as well. So it was on paper. The fact that I got into network marketing when I did is pretty amazing. But I had hit this point in my journey. I was 6 months sober. And spiritually, I was getting stronger every day and, really able to work through a lot of the emotional traumas that I had been through. That's a forever work in progress, just FYI for you guys out there, it's never done. But I had been physically feeling kind of crappy. And this girl that I knew that I used to work with, all of a sudden was feeling really great and full of energy. And I'm like, I need that. Give me whatever you got. Give me the box, shut up and leave me alone is basically how I started in network marketing. I was that person, right? I was that person is just don't ever call me. She tagged me on Facebook that first week and I called her and lit her up. I'm like, get my effing name off that Facebook post. I did not give you, I was that person, you guys. in network marketing. But at about the day 4 or 5 mark, I had slept through the night, which was something I hadn't done since I was a little girl. And that was pretty powerful for me. You know, by day 7, I felt better than I'd ever felt in my life. And it was at that moment that I Googled the company, because I was not going to talk to this girl about this, because I didn't want a stalker. I did not like, and we weren't great friends. We joke now because we were like frenemies. We were very friendly with each other, but we could not be more different, kind of thing. And so I Googled, you know, the company and the product, and I realized it was network marketing. I was like, oh shit, it's one of those things. Like, great. Now I'm going to have to call her to get more of this stuff. Like, that was my first thought. Like, great. I don't want to be tied to her. Like, I just want to like go online and order my shit and not tell anybody about it. But I did call her. I said, okay, listen, I see this is network marketing. I was interviewing for jobs because when I went into rehab, I walked away from my 15-year career in the car industry because it was super toxic for me, right? Environment is stronger than willpower. And that environment was not healthy for me. And I was interviewing for jobs. Headhunters were after me because I was really good at what I did, right? So I called her. I said, listen, I know you've been doing this a few months, right? She's like, yeah. I'm like, bottom line me, how much money are you making? And she gave me a number that I was like, okay. And mind you, this is the same girl I replaced at my job. So I knew what I did replacing her. She gave me a number and I knew I could triple that in just that same amount of time. If she could do it, I could do it, kind of thing. And it was on day 7 that I decided that, like, I had prayed for an opportunity when my dad passed away to be able to be anywhere I needed to be. This was not what I had in mind. I was like, this is not what I meant, God. Like, when I said I wanted an opportunity, this is not at all what I meant. But, you know, the timing of rock bottom will humble you in ways. And, you know, when your best thinking has gotten you into some really rough spots, you're kind of willing to try something different. And that's exactly how I ended up in network marketing. You know, fast forward a few years, it took me 2 years to go from 0 to $1 million, and with a lot of work. But there was this special tool that I was using early on, because if you think about it, I had no social network at this point. I had wiped out my entire social network because my environment was so toxic. I pretty much abandoned every environment that I had been in before, other than my children. So I didn't have a big network. But when I looked at the compensation plan, when I was day 7 in the products, I understood that I could make this work due to leverage, right? It wasn't like this turn and burn, like the only way you can make money was if you enrolled thousands of people, because if that was the case, there's no way in the world I could have made that work. But the way, when I looked at the compensation plan, I understood very, very clearly that it was about leverage. And I had some tools in my toolbox that I could leverage every human being that I got in front of, because I knew how to speak to anyone at this point. That wasn't always the case. So every person that I talked to, I was able to speak what was in it for them with love and compassion. Not once did anybody ever feel the gift of desperation that I was working from, because I was pretty desperate. You know, single mom with 2 kids, no job, not sure how we're keeping a roof over the head, kind of thing. But nobody ever felt that. And that's a gift in this toolbox that I had. And so, you know, when you can speak what's in it for them to every single person you come in contact with, that builds credibility and trust, and they'll go to the ends of the earth and do what you tell them to do. And that's exactly what happened. And that's how I really leveraged. I took 82 people in that first 2 years, 82, multiplied that into 15,000, because I leveraged their communities, not necessarily mine. And those 15,000 created my first $1 million income in the 26 months. So that's how I got into network marketing. That, you know, it was a shit show, quite honestly. And it was ignorance on fire, but with this deep burning desire to serve every human being, because I really did believe, like, with every person we come in contact with, you have to speak what's in it for them. That's how the even energy and value exchange happens in relationships, not just in network marketing and business, but in friendships and romantic partnerships and things like that, with your children, right? So that's how I got started in all of it.
It's so funny because, like, we were on different teams, but we were always connected. So the back history of you and I, my first corporate event was in September of 2013. It was I think it was an ICU in Phoenix, and it was my first event. Jimmy the Butcher opened the show. Susan Sly presented, and I remember they were going over like recognition and stuff, and I remember this like it was yesterday. You were there with your team, and you guys were all wearing green shirts. And I remember like you stood up and you were sharing your story, and it got pretty emotional. But I remember like all these people in green shirts going crazy like when you stood up, and I'm like, what is she doing over there? Like, what's going on over there? And then fast forward the next summer, I had won a trip to St. Thomas. And the first day we're in this room, and it was a very, very small group. I mean, it was a very special 5 days that we spent. And we had to, partner up with these 3 or 4 people, and you ended up being my partner. And again, things kind of, came full circle, and all of 2019 we spent in an elite level mastermind together. And it's just, so for those that are listening that don't know Tracy from anybody else, and you're hearing this story, I literally saw her from day one constantly grow into the person that she's always been destined to be. And and I mean, Tracy and I talk every couple months, and we catch up, and I'm to this day, 7 years later, still amazed at everything that she continues to bring to the table, because she's constantly reinventing herself. And that's what I really want to get into today, because, I think you're the epitome of pivoting, because you've had to pivot. I mean, before network marketing, Tracy had to pivot. We've had a lot of parallels in our life. We've had some relationships that were not good, to keep it very light. We both have had to figure out how to raise our children, by ourselves. And, I'm grateful that, I found my partner that I'm going to be marrying, but I was doing it by myself for a while. And you always found a way to pivot and always move forward. And what I want the audience to realize, pivoting doesn't mean pivoted to make more money. You were pivoting before the money showed up. You were pivoting because you were following where you were being led, and intuition, the universe, higher power, whatever it is, you knew that you were onto something. So let's talk about the most recent pivot, because it seems recent to most people, but this pivot actually happened a long time ago, but it kind of came to fruition of what this actually was. So let's talk about that pivot and what you're doing now, but actually when that pivot and that aha moment of what you're doing now actually came about.
This is the thing. Like, if you've heard the acronym KISS, right? KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? But I want you to be more gentle with yourself. Keep it simple, sweetheart, right? Compassion, because compassion is a superpower. So we don't want to be calling ourselves stupid names, right? But it's so fascinating that the thing that I'm talking about right now with the Enneagram is the very freaking thing that started my entire transformation 7.5 years ago. So you heard at the beginning of this that I was in rehab, right? And that was a very humbling experience. And, I willingly went, that was my decision only. And it was day 2 that I was in rehab that I meet my therapist, who I still see to this day. And she's this tough girl from Texas, like no bullshit, which is exactly what I needed, because I'd been to 9 therapists before and manipulated all of them. I was really good at it. And she saw right through me, and she, on day 2, wanted me to take this Enneagram test. And I was like, no. I was like a bitch. I was like, no, I am not taking that. You're not going to put me in another box and put another label on me. Clearly, I have a list of labels on me because I'm here in rehab. And she spoke this into me, and she said, honey, she goes, this might actually help you get out of the box the world has put you in. And this may actually help you get out of the box that you've put yourself in. And quite honestly, honey, my dear, she says this all the time, my dear, your best thinking has gotten you here. I was like, well, touche to that. So on day 2, In rehab, I took the Enneagram test, and it was very eye-opening. And what it did is you know, I was 40 years old at the time, so I just turned 48. And I had just turned 40, and that's a lot of baggage. It's a lot of years and decades of baggage, right? To try and unpack all of that can be overwhelming. And when we are overwhelmed, we do nothing, we become paralyzed, right? The Enneagram really helped it not be so overwhelming. It was like this roadmap to who Tracy always was, who I was before the world got a hold of me and traumas got a hold of me, and, parents that didn't have a lot of good emotional tools. Like, my parents were good people, but they didn't have the tools to really give Tracy what she needed. And when I saw the Enneagram and my type specifically, it was like, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. When I saw where my type goes under stress, like, I've been pretty much living there my entire life. But then, where there's dark, there must be light. And thank God I had that epiphany in that moment. And immediately my eyes went from the darkness of my type to, well, there must be more. And I saw all the beautiful qualities of my type: world-class leader, justice seeker, truth teller, decisive, empowerment speaker. Like, these people, like, this person before you even walk in a room. And I was like, yes, that's who I am. Like, that's who I knew I always was. But all this other stuff kind of like got me here. And understanding that was those behaviors that weren't so pretty: the bully, the intimidator, the aggressive, all those not so pretty parts. When I could identify that was just me under stress, it allowed me to have compassion for myself for the first fucking time in my life. And it made unpacking 4 decades of stuff not so overwhelming. And it also made me realize exactly in that moment that my children at home were not this type. And I was only speaking like this type. And so, since I had nothing to do but take care of myself in rehab, I really started investigating the other types and trying to figure out what my kids were, because speaking to them as though they are me clearly wasn't working. And it wasn't like how my heart felt and what my heart meant wasn't landing the way that I intended. And I could feel their spirit breaking every time I opened my mouth. And as a parent, like, that's the last thing I wanted to do. And so I started to really master my own self-awareness first, because that's really important. If you can't lead yourself, you can't lead anybody else, whether it's your children, a team, whatever. And what I loved about it the most was it allowed me for the first time to have compassion, not just for myself, but then other people. Because when I started to read the other types, how they showed up under stress, like the things that irritated me about my children that felt very disrespectful, if you're a parent, you know what I mean? The things they do that, like, oh, that pushes the button. When I looked at who they were, I was like, that's them under stress. And I could immediately have compassion for them too. It wasn't personal and it wasn't disrespectful. They were under stress, clearly living with me. So that's what I loved about it. And I got it right away. And so, fast forward 6 months later, when I decide, like, I'm going to build a network marketing team and I'm going to build it like bulletproof, I knew that this was the tool that I would use to really identify who was in front of me and how to speak to them, recognize when they're under stress. Instead of like being Judge Judy like I was most of my life, I could be like this compassionate, heart-led leader for them and speak life into them. And that was the tool all along that not only I used to turn my entire household around, right? I did. They were 14 and 15 at the time. That is not an easy age to be parenting. And especially when you're a single mom who's been a shit show and maybe not the greatest for them, to turn it around on a dime using this was powerful. And so then 6 months later, when network marketing came into my life, I was like, well, it worked there. Now, why don't I use the same tool to leverage every human being and really be able to see people for who they really were and not who I had judged them to be.
The way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything. And if that one thing works, why not replicate it? So for people that are not familiar with this test, talk very, very, very 10,000 foot view. What is this test? And for people that maybe can't relate to recovery that we went through. I had some, my issues from the past with family and this, that, or the other. For people that didn't maybe have the upbringing that you and I had, or the stories that we had to how we had to overcome, for the everyday person, explain what this test is and how it could really benefit someone in entrepreneurship, in network marketing, if they're having really that trouble leading their team, connecting with the people in their business, and how it could benefit them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to preface this by saying, like, if you've already kind of shut me out and you're like, yeah, I don't like those things. I'm not a label. I'm not that. I want you to know I understand. But this is different than these other personality tests out there. I mean, they're all like, any kind of self-awareness you can gain is valuable, right? And then it's what you do with it that makes it work. Like, it's one thing, like I see people take the Enneagram and then they don't take action with what they know, or they use it as a weapon or a wall, right? Had I done this a year earlier than I did, this probably looks really different, and I would have used it as a weapon or a wall. But it's a personality test, but it's more psychology rooted, right? I do believe that we were all born with our unique gifts, temperament, personalities. I really, really do. And as a mother carrying both my children, I know that to be true. Their disposition in my belly is exactly who they are in the world today, 20 something years later. So I do believe that. And if you don't believe that, whatever, you don't have to. But I do believe that we are wired a certain way. And there's 9 basic personality types, and there's so much more complexity to it than just 9. There's subtypes and wings and all sorts of things that, you could have 2 of the same type standing right next to each other and they can appear completely different. And we're not going to get into all of that, but it is complex. But what I loved about it, it's like this soul roadmap, right? And, when you look at the healthiest part of whatever type, whatever of the 9 types you are, like, that's how we were born. Like, I was born decisive. I mean, as a little girl, before the world got a hold of me and before the traumas happened, I can very easily see that. My first memories, I was like this decisive, intuitive little girl. I really, really was. And then shit happens, right? And then we take on the unhealthier parts. But it's this beautiful roadmap to get to your soul's actual calling. It really, really is. And when we can recognize, when we are about to kind of go off the grid a little bit from where our destination is, like the grand destination for you is the healthiest form of who you were always destined to be. When I started the Enneagram, I was probably at a level 3 of 9, right? And I knew I was headed to the 9. So I plugged in my coordinates for my type, so to speak. I want you to think like GPS, internal GPS, a soul GPS. So I plug in my coordinates for where I'm headed for my type. Not Susie on Instagram, not Scott Aaron, but Tracy. Tracy's type, my GPS types, my GPS coordinates. And if you've ever used a GPS or like something like Waze, where it lets you know in real time when you're about to go off course or if you need to be rerouted, the Enneagram can work like that for you. And understanding those parts of me when I'm under stress as just a compass, not like shame hits, like all those things that are actually letting me know I'm under stress were things I used to just shame myself into silence and shame myself into addiction and shame myself into anger. But understanding that those are just me under stress. They're like those little bumpy things on the side of the road. When you hit those, you're like, oh shit. And you get right back in your lane. Like, now knowing where I go under stress, it's just like little bumpy things. They don't carry as much emotional charge anymore. It's just letting me know. And I don't go, off the cliff. I don't go, into a destination that was never meant for me. And so when you use this properly and in integrity, first on yourself, like master yourself first, you'll have compassion for yourself because you can't give what you don't have. And you can say all the right things to somebody, but if you truly don't have compassion in your heart for even yourself, you cannot give that to somebody else fully, right? And so this really allows you to get to who you are always destined to be and your unique gifts. And, looking at this, I was like, wow, I've been trying to be like that person my entire life, and we're not even wired the same. So letting that go gives you so much more freedom to step into who you were always designed to be. But you have to be willing to look at all the parts, the shiny and the shitty. I say that all the time. And the shitty doesn't necessarily mean bad, right? The shitty parts are where we go under stress, and it's just a compass, right? So I love when people really use this as a roadmap, because it is the most powerful tool. Honestly, I think knowing this information has helped me remain sober almost 8 years, because there have been times in my life where stress is happening. I mean, we're living in a freaking quarantine zone right now. Like 10 years ago, oh my God, how destructive I would have been under stress like this. But understanding where I do go, it takes that emotional charge and that weight, that heavy weightness off of it, when used properly, right? But you got to be honest with yourself.
So, especially for network marketers,
Mm-hmm.
Two questions. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
how could it really help that network marketer? Because they're probably thinking, I've heard these before. I'm a
Sure.
red, I'm a yellow, I'm a white, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the disc method, all those,
Mm-hmm.
this is completely different,
It is
because
completely different.
there's 9 types, and they couldn't be any more spot on, because you need to know who you are. I mean, plain and simple, because when you know who you are, it's going to allow you to take your communication skills to the next level when you are talking to someone, either in your business or prospecting them for your business. So number one, how beneficial is this for a network marketer? And number two, when they're clued into who they are, and people that you've worked with, what kind of changes have you seen in the people that you've worked with from, before they got to Tracy
Mm-hmm.
until after they left working with Tracy?
This is my superpower. And, I'm one of those people that either I terrify you or you feel like, oh my gosh, you get me. Like it's one or the other. And usually if you're terrified of me, it's because I get you and that scares you, right? There's usually one of two things. And, like the color code test, DISC, Myers-Briggs, those are all really amazing, but they only focus on behaviors. And where I see people using the Enneagram wrong, or where they're mistyped, is focusing only on the behaviors. And I mean, we know this, we do all this personal development, and, like I love Brendan Burchard and all that, but like the habits, and that's important. Like you got to start changing habits. But if you don't know what motivates what you've always done, it's just a matter of time until stress hits that you're going to go back to what you know and what truly motivates you, right? And how the Enneagram is very, very, very different. And especially if you're typed properly, is you understand everything, every decision, every conversation, anything you do is motivated by one thing. Like for me, on the outside, my behaviors, in fact, my therapist thought I was a different type than I am based on behaviors. And, especially in the network marketing space, I appear very high achiever like, right? I do. I mean, I get shit done. But I'm not motivated by what an achiever is. An achiever on the Enneagram, which is a 3, type 3, is they're everything that motivates them is based on, they believe that their worth is based on what they do, their image, success. And although I had those behaviors, I mean, from 0 to 1,000,000 in 2 years, it looks very high achiever like, and I recognize that. But my motive is not about success. It never has been. I could give a shit about any recognition. I think we talked about that last time. I don't care about that. The reason I high achieve is based on the motive of the 8, the challenger. I do not want to be backed in a corner. I don't want to be put in a vulnerable situation. I don't want decisions made for me. And that was the reason behind my high achieving, because quite honestly, I don't want recognition. I don't like it because that makes me vulnerable in my eyes, right? And so how does this help network marketers? Like if I just went on behaviors, I would probably label you all as achievers because you're all trying to achieve and you're all trying to do all the things that Susie on Instagram's doing. But if your motive isn't that, it's not going to last. It's never going to last. And so knowing what I know, even though I could see behaviors, I would ask the questions to understand the motive behind it. Like there's 6 degrees of separation. You know, you hear that all the time. The questions I would ask were not based on habits and behaviors. Like, what's driving that? I wanted to know what was driving that behavior. And once I locked in on the motive behind it, I knew exactly who I was talking to. You know, there's a type on the Enneagram called the loyalist, the 6. They can appear very achiever-like. They can also appear very challenger-like. But their deepest motivation is safety, security, certainty, and support. Very different than the achiever, very different than the challenger. And so if I have a loyalist in front of me and knowing this, I can speak to support, like, you're safe. Here's where certainty is. Here's your spreadsheet, because I know that's important to you. Like, they need to like troubleshoot, right? That's not how I operate. But again, if I want to effectively lead somebody, I have to speak the language that they speak, right? And knowing that as a network marketer, like, if you don't know what motivates your people, and it's way more than the why and all that, like, this is deep fucking rooted. Deep, 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 deep. This goes way beyond the why that they're telling you. But you have to be willing to ask hard questions, and then you have to know what to do with it and the language that they speak. And if you can't speak your own language, how are you going to speak anybody else's? So my advice is take your type, make sure you're typed properly, because I'm here to tell you, every single test online, they're about 70% wrong. Right. And so a little tip, if you don't work with somebody like me to get it right, which I do highly recommend, somebody that is not you, somebody that can be objective and ask the right questions to get to the root of it. But if you do go and explore this on your own, take the top 3 or 4 that you get. The top score is almost never what you are, almost never. It's usually where you go under stress, or maybe one of your wings, or, there's so much to it. But I usually tell people, if you're going to explore this on your own, take the top 3 or 4 types that you get in your scores and really look at the motive of each one, not the behaviors, but the motivation for each one. And then take your time with it and look at different areas of your life, because like you said, how you do anything is how you do everything. When I looked at myself, how I showed up in parenting, how I showed up in my health, how I showed up in business, and how I showed up in personal, like intimate relationships, every decision and every kind of behavior I had was always deep rooted in, I don't want to be backed in a corner and vulnerable. No question about it. No freaking question about it. And so knowing that about myself, it's like when I get scared or start to go into sabotage, because I'm human, I can stop myself and say, okay, where do I feel vulnerable right now? Why am I afraid? What is scaring me about being, like, what is going to make me feel vulnerable? And then I can kind of educate my own little self in me that was scared all along, and really work through that. And when you're working with other people, when like for that loyalist, knowing that they're always needing certainty. My best friends are all 6s, and I can speak safety, certainty, and security and support into them. And trust me, that didn't come easy, because I'm one of those as a challenger. It's like, fucking get over it. Like, just handle it, deal with it. Like, that's me. But if I spoke that into my 6 friends, that's disrespectful and uncaring and not compassionate. Right. So that's how it can help you in network marketing as well. Like, when you've got a leader that you think is just ghosting you and you're taking it personal, like, look at the things that are stressing them out. Right. When I can see like a 3 kind of go to the dark side, the achiever, like, I know that, okay, I got to speak some greatness into them. I got to dish out some compliments a little bit, because that's what motivates them. Right. That's not my thing at all. I can't stand doing it. It's so hard for me, but I have to do it for my 3s, because that's what motivates them. That's speaking their language. And, if you're in network marketing, even if you're at rock bottom like I was, and you need to make this happen, and I want you to know I understand that, you have to be able to speak what's in it for them, and genuinely, not to manipulate them to get what you want. Like, your come from has to be so compassionate and genuine that at the end of the day, you really do want to help them get what they want. But then having the backup language to really support that, that's how you do this, and do this very quickly. And that's how you leverage people.
It's all about communication, because
everything is communication.
and especially in leadership, if you can't if you can't properly communicate to your team, obviously, because everyone's different,
Mm-hmm.
the best leaders are the ones that lead people by understanding the other people, not understanding themselves. And I think this also can reflect upon the 5 love languages. It's a great book.
Mm-hmm.
And, naturally as human beings, what we do is we know our love languages, but
Mm-hmm.
what people tend to do is they start treating their partner the way that they want to be treated because it's their love language, but you actually have to find out what the other person's love language is. And you have to speak to them in that language to really create that connection. And any relationship building business or relationship itself, whether you're married or dating or whatever you're doing, that same thing is replicated when you're building a network marketing business, because when you're building a team, there's trust, there's rapport, there's connection. And if you're not communicating correctly to the people that you're building an organization with, that's why it's either stagnant, falling flat on its face, or going backwards, because you have to do that job of understanding your people. Just like you said in the beginning, Tracy, it's not what's in it for me, it's what's in it for them. What can I do for the other? I know I am doing it. I want to
Mm-hmm.
find out their needs, their wants, their desires, understand where they are from 1 to 9 so I can properly communicate to them. So I think that's brilliant.
Well,
Now,
when you think about it, like, I mean, I have 7 millionaires on my team in 7 years. And I was just writing down their types. One is an 8, one's a 6, one's a 1, a 3, a 7, and a 2. So I've got a challenger, a loyalist, a reformer, an achiever, an enthusiast, and a helper. Like, to be able to lead all of those different kind of personalities that are all driven by very, very, very different things is a gift. And not only that, but also create it where none of them are reliant on me for their own leadership. They have taken the life, the belief, the whatever I spoke into them and taken it and run with it. And when you can speak to all different types, like me 10 years ago could only speak to 8s, which are the challengers. And I'm telling you right now, that would be a shit show. Like we hear you attract what you are. That could be good and it can be not so good, right? Especially if you're so rigid. You want to attract the same like work ethic, you want to attract the same compassion that you are, but you need to be able to attract every single different kind of personality out there to really have a machine that has all these different people with their own special gifts. Like, because if I tried to be a 6, a 1, a 3, a 7, or 2, I'm out. Like, it doesn't come naturally to me. I can speak to it, I can tap into it, but it's not my go-to like instinctual kind of thing. But because I was able to speak to all different types, every single, like, there's not a conversation I'm afraid to have with anybody ever, because I can identify within 2 to 3 minutes who I'm talking to and go right to their motive. And that's why I get the like, holy shit, she sees right through me, do you read minds kind of look. And either they go running because it scares them, or they're like, whew. Because here's the thing, if you think back to when you were a child, and especially if you grew up with some trauma, I know very early on, by the age of 4, I didn't feel seen, heard, or understood, because I was that strong kid that nobody worried about, right? I was that really good kid, that independent kid that nobody ever fucking worried about. And that is true. And I was still a little girl that had needs, and please, somebody pay attention to me. Don't you see that I'm scared? Right? And so when you can speak to people in a way that they are seen, heard, and understood for who they are at their core, not only will they believe that you can lead them to greatness, but they will do what you tell them to do. And especially if your come from is, love and compassion and service, the sky's the limit with what you can do in network marketing. And it's why I was successful. It's why I'm still successful. And it's why, my team is now 100,000 people deep, because it multiplied like that. That's the kind of ripple effect you want. Cancer spreads fast. So does something beautiful like this. Compassion spreads just as fast as a cancer can. But you have to start with that.
so powerful. And that's the thing. Success can spread as fast as anything else. And
Mm-hmm.
listen, people hear, oh my God, 100,000 people, but that's still 7 years. It was not overnight. It's been, almost 8 years now since you've been building this, and obviously things compound, they
Mhm.
compound over time, which is also something to definitely take note of. So Tracy, before we start to wind down and get to my favorite question to ask people, for those entrepreneurs, those business coaches, that also, need to learn something like
Mhm.
this so they can communicate with their clients or potential clients better, and that network marketer that's struggling, how can people learn more about how you assist people? How can they find you? How can they connect with you?
There's a few different ways that I work with people. So I work with a lot of high level business coaches as well. And when they onboard a client, the first step a lot of them have is to do a session with me. And so then I kind of consult with the business coach because, to learn the ins and outs of all of this, like it's complex. Like it's not just like, oh, they're a 9. Okay, I know exactly. Like it's very complex. So a lot of the things, if you're a high level business coach, partnering with me for that first session with them so I can properly type them. I can tell you like the language to use, like when they're going to ghost you, what this looks like, what's really happening, so that you can bring them on course and you can accelerate the transformation that you're able to give with them. That is one of my favorite things to do, is to help business coaches onboard clients. Like especially if you do like one-on-one. I also speak to organizations and groups. Like, so if you have a network marketing team and you're the leader of that team, bringing me in to not only properly type people, but then to speak to all the different gifts and really give people permission to be who they were. They don't have to be, Susie on Instagram. You can be equally as successful in a way that feels authentic to you, where it's sustainable. Because if you're doing it because it's authentic to you, it's going to be sustainable. So that's a beautiful gift. I love speaking to teams. I also go into businesses and organizations and say, okay, like here's your sales team. This is what Joe's good at. This is what Susie's good at. This is her strength. And, when you have a cohesive team that not only understands each other, but knows what each other's gifts are and where they go under stress to serve the greatest good, right? You'll have a more efficient, productive, profit generating team, right? And I think when we can all look at each other, especially if you're working within a team, and have understanding, this, like, you can do anything as a team, anything. And instead of being judgmental or comparing yourself to somebody else, um, it's just something that isn't great. When you go down that road, it's just a shit show. So how I can help you, if you're like, yeah, that's great, I don't have a big team yet, I don't have a business yet, I also do individual sessions so we can properly type you, and then I can take you on a journey and take you through the entire ins and outs of your type, like that self-mastery, self-awareness mastery. I take you through like a 5-6 part series of that. How you showed up as a child, your defense mechanisms, your wings, your subtypes, like all the complexities of your type as well. Because I really believe like you can't give what you don't have. And if you don't have your own self-awareness, you're not going to be able to really know who you're talking to. You're not going to know their love language. You're not going to know what motivates them, no matter how hard you try, because you have to be able to do it for yourself too. So you can go to my website, tracyo'malley.com. The work with me section basically explains all of that. You can find me on Instagram, Tracy_O'Malley. Hit me up in the DMs if you have questions. But I think that, if you are a leader, and it doesn't necessarily mean network marketing, if you are in a home with people, you're leading people in your home, whether it's your children, a partner, spouse. This is probably one of the greatest gifts you could give to yourself, and one of the greatest tools you'll ever have in your toolbox. Mark my words, especially when it's used properly and in integrity.
I love that. And obviously all this will be in the show notes for people to connect with. And I highly encourage you guys to reach out to Tracy, just to talk to her. You learn a lot about yourself. And when you know more about who you are, you show up much differently. And that will be a true reflection in everything that you do. So I'll put that all in the show notes. Tracy, final question. And I'm interested to hear this because I want to go back and I want to listen to this question from last year.
Yeah.
So what does success truly mean to you right now?
It'll probably be the same answer, because I truly do believe that success to me is the ability to be present in the exact moment that is in front of me. And that takes a level of self-awareness to be able to do that. Like if I'm thinking 10 steps ahead, I'm not aware of like myself right here, right now. And through the self-mastery of self-awareness, that ability to be present. Yeah, I have a calendar full today. I know I do. I don't even know what's next, because everything that matters to me right here, right now is you and this conversation and the beautiful audience that you have. And that is success, because when you are able to be present in every single moment, whether it's with your children, a business partner, a client, yourself, that's where the gifts happen. That is where those aha moments happen. That is where connection happens. And connection is everything. You know, people that have addictions, like the opposite of addiction is connection, right? The opposite of, you know, feeling lonely is connection. The opposite of everything that's hard in your life is connection. And the only way to truly be connected is to be present in every single moment. And to me, that is the most successful thing you could do.
Love that. I mean, connection is what I teach. Connection is what I live by. It's honestly, it's one of my greatest core values, because especially right now while we're quarantined, I think there's two things that people are really seeking right now. They're seeking community and they're seeking connection. And there are ways to create that every single day. And Tracy, I'm so grateful for you and the love, compassion, and all of the gifts that you bring now to the second episode, and I'm sure there's going to be a third, because obviously it's becoming a reoccurring theme that my audience needs to hear from you. So again, I just so much love and gratitude for you and your friendship and everything that you've always done for me. So thank you again so much for being here today.
You know what? It's such an honor. I love the way that you lead and serve, and you're one of the biggest heart-led leaders I've ever met in my life. And what a gift you are to your community and every person you touch. So it's just an honor to be here. Thank you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. And guys, I hope, as always, you enjoyed this episode. You know, please leave your comments, your aha moments, your takeaways. DM myself and Tracy on Instagram. Let us know, you know, what really moved you in this episode. And again, all the ways to contact Tracy will be in the show notes. And I highly, highly encourage you guys to reach out to her. So again, thank you guys so much for being here today. Please enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you again so much for checking out this week's episode. And if you can, head over to iTunes, search for Network Marketing Made Simple, leave me a 5-star rating, basic review. I would be grateful for all of the support you guys can give me. And again, if you'd be interested in learning more how to utilize LinkedIn to grow your business, your brand, and your bank account, head over to my website, www.scottaaron.net. Fill out the form for your free 15-minute discovery call so I can learn more about you, your business, and how we can work together. And again, thank you guys so much. Grateful for you all, and I'll see you next time.